Hi, my name's Rishi. I'm trying something new, and I wanted to highlight some stuff in comics. I wanted to go through my pull list for this week, as well as some of the other stuff that I've been reading that is good and that I want to shout out. I'm gonna just get straight into it. The first comic I picked up from DC, Action Comics, number 1076. Part of the Phantoms arc in Action Comics, written by Mark Waid, drawn by Clayton Henry, and there's also a backup featuring Supergirl by Mariko Tamaki, and this is currently part 6 of an arc, so it's maybe not the easiest place to step on. You might find yourself confused. I'd probably recommend starting from 170 or waiting until January, which is when this arc finishes. Next arc starts at issue 1082. But anyway, getting onto this arc. This book, I enjoyed this issue. There's some stuff I'm probably going to want to talk about. Spoiler-wise, I'll probably put a link in the timestamp in the description for when you can go to when I finish talking about this book, spoiler-wise. But for what I'm saying right now, obviously Mark Waid's a legend. This isn't the only time he's in this list. And I really do think he gets the character of Superman. Like, that's genuinely a very positive thing that needs to be said when someone gets it right, because it's not always the case. Mark Waid gets it. I would say my primary criticism of this book, if I had to have one, is that I do think it spreads itself a bit thin, and that leads to a story that maybe didn't need to be 12 issues long. Like, it's incredibly decompressed. I guess getting into spoilers, no, not yet. Getting into spoilers, because I said it now, I'm gonna stand by it. This book is really good. It talks about the Phantom Zone in some really interesting ways. It does something I wonder about, in that part of it has involved Clark going back to Krypton before it blew up and interacting with his parents, Jor and Lara, and it's good. It's everything you'd want to see. Makes me wonder whether there's a delegitimizing effect to something like that. Like, do we want it to always have been the case now in canon going forward in every superhero story that there was essentially a couple of hours where Clark went back to Krypton and had some science conversations with his father and punched his uncle in the face and a bunch of stuff? But that's not everything. It doesn't need to be that big a thing if you don't hang a bunch on it. My bigger problem, like I said, is I do think that this book suffers from decompression a bit. Clark is not the only one with a story in here. Like I said, you've got your backup featuring Supergirl, and that's good. I like the art of that backup, but Supergirl's not the only one who's got a story. In the Clark stuff, in the midst of the Clark stuff, there's also a story going on with Connor Kent, aka Superboy, and Kenan Kong, who is the Superman of China. You can sort of get what you need from reading this. You don't need to be too scared about not knowing who he is, but he's a fun character, and I recommend going back to Rebirth and reading the new Superman of China run. But, you've got Clark goes off to Krypton. You've got Mon-El, the reintroduction of Mon-El, the Daxamite hero who is also a friend of Clark and who went into the Phantom Zone. You essentially have 4 different stories being told in this book, and the time that Clark spends on Krypton has essentially spanned across 3 issues now, and I maybe don't think it needed to. I like the book. I just wonder how many stories it wants to tell at the same time, and if it slows down the pacing for telling the one story that it's named after and it seems to be the most about, which is the Phantom Zone story, if it sacrifices the pacing of that story to also do a Kara story and also do a story where Connor and Kenan take on an alien British museum It's funny. It's funny. Don't get me wrong. I don't want it removed. I just wonder if it would make more sense to not be in here. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Action Comics. Next one we have Batman and Robin, Year 1. Grayson, Dick Grayson. That's the Robin it is. This is Mark Waid again and Chris Samnee. The creative team you would probably recognize if you're a Daredevil fan, because they had a Daredevil run and it's really good. Read that. That's nothing to do with this. You don't need to... Different company. Read it, but also I definitely recommend this book. As someone whose favorite Robin is Dick Grayson, he brings so much to it. He started it. No one else has ever been as iconoclastic a Robin as the person who originated the role of Robin. I like this book. This is issue 2, actually. This isn't issue 1. Issue 2, Mark Waid and Chris Samnee, and I really like it. It's exactly what a layperson would think of as the Batman and Robin dynamic. It's just having started off. It's Batman has just gotten a Robin. Robin is a fairly new concept. Everyone does think it's kind of strange that he's done this. Like, why did you bring a child to your war on crime? But also, there is a lack of modern cynicism that would make you question why Robin exists, because it does treat it like Robin is supposed to exist. And Waid writes Dick so wonderfully charming. Like, he's such a born performer. That's something that's true of Dick that I maybe wouldn't say is true of Jason or Steph or Tim or Damien. Dick was always the one who was showing off in front of crowds. So when, we get to see things like a social worker coming to the Wayne mansion to check and make sure that Grayson is okay, of course he's going to be flipping around, and of course that's going to pose an issue for Bruce. I also love the art in this book. Look at this. It's gorgeous, isn't it? It's so good. Yeah, I recommend this book so much. Like I said, this is issue 2, but you can start at this issue. You don't miss much from issue 1, whilst, understand, issue 1 is good, but this is a fine starting point. I would recommend it as a starting point if you wanted to. And it's a great way to get to grips with the Batman and Robin dynamic, especially the Dick Grayson Bruce Wayne dynamic. Third issue, Batman Superman World's Finest. This is probably the DC book that everyone's been talking about this last couple of years. It's Mark Waid again. He's on this list 3 times. I like it. I've really liked this book. I don't know if I'm finding it as strong as I did during some previous arcs, but Waid knows everything. Mark Waid is a guy who knows continuity so well, and he loves his DC deep cuts. I love this cover. This cover is by Adrian Gutierrez and Tamara Bunverlin. Gutierrez is also the artist for the interiors. Shouldn't have shown the cover. That's Dan Mora, the artist for the interiors. And it looks great. It really looks good. I think, considering how much of a rising star Dan Mora is in comics art right now, I think anyone who was going to be working on this World's Finest book with Mark Waid was absolutely going to face being compared to Dan Mora. But this work, the Adrian Gutierrez art, it stands up to it. Like, it's really good. It's a wonderful comic to look at. You really enjoy looking at everything. And they give us so much to look at. This book, it says Batman Superman on it, and it started as purely a Batman Superman crossover book. But this arc is the Shadows Fall arc. This is the 3rd arc of a 3-issue arc. So while I wouldn't recommend this as being your first jumping on point, The next issue looks like it's going to be a new arc, so I'd start there, absolutely. But this arc contains the Justice League of America, it contains the Justice Society, and you get to see so many different characters you would want to see drawn in a more nostalgic costume or a more nostalgic style than they are currently in. It's wonderful. It's got the Spectre in it. I don't know enough about the Spectre. I know some about the Spectre. I would like to know more about the Spectre. I managed to pick up, I think it was a John Ostrander, it's called Crime and Punishment Spectre miniseries that I managed to find in a little shop in London. I'm going to read that because the Spectre is cool as hell. This art is gorgeous. And I love this book. You should be reading it because it looks really nice. And also, the next issue, the one that I said is a good jumping on point, seems to be a team up between Batgirl, Barbara Gordon, and Jimmy Olsen, as well as Crypto the Superdog and Ace the Bat Hound. And that sounds wonderful. It just sounds wonderful to read. I don't know if that's an arc in and of itself. I don't know if that's standalone. I don't know if that's going to be a group thing. I'm going to be buying that book. Justice Society End page. Read the book. It's good. Next. Ooh. Okay. So this might not be on everyone else's pull lists, but it was on mine as soon as it was announced. This is the question. This is the question. I think this is an ongoing. I don't think this is a limited series. I think this is an ongoing. Renee Montoya, The Question, by Alex Segura and Sian Tormi and Romulo Ferrado Jr., I believe. If I'm getting that wrong, if I'm mispronouncing those names, please somebody tell me. I will learn. I will grow. But it's Renee Montoya, The Question, a character who I deeply love. I think she's great. This is the first issue, so it's a perfect jumping on point for the character. It's very steeped in DC continuity, i.e., it's coming out after the All-In special. We know that its events fall out from the Absolute Justice event, but you do not have to have read them because it gives you your serviceable catch-up. You don't need to know every single thing to know Renee Montoya has relocated from Gotham City due to Chip Zdarsky Batman run events to the Watchtower, where in the wake of All Out, when the Justice League's roster has greatly been expanded and the Watchtower has been put back online, she is the head of security for the Watchtower. It basically gives you a perfect way to tell a whodunit mystery. It gets to tell you a story that is perfect for the Question. This is a new design for the Question. I like the blue bandana. I like the big gun. We find out it's non-lethal because Justice League working with Batman and such. But this book looks really nice, and it's a really good stepping on point for the character. It's also set on the Justice League Watchtower, as I said, in the aftermath of the events of Absolute Power and All Out. So you get such amazing potential for random characters to pop up. We've been given some of the characters who are going to regularly be showing up, like Ted Kord, Blue Beetle, Jaime Reyes, Blue Beetle, Kate Kane, who obviously for longtime fans of Renee Montoya The Question know that's going to be fun and interesting to read because they are linked. I've got Buddy Baker, aka Animal Man, who I am not that aware of outside of the Grant Morrison book. But you know, I could go for reading the Jeff Lemire book. I just need it to be recommended to me, and I need the time. But yeah, you've got a lot of fun characters just showing up in the background. Some highlights for me this issue were basically all of the Justice League Dark showing up in one scene, including the Creeper. Fire and Ice. Well, we get to see Fire at one point of Fire and Ice from the JLI, but because of something that happened in Absolute Power, it seems like Fire and Ice have now switched powers. I probably think they should probably switch superhero identities, like superhero names as well, for simplicity's sake. You don't want someone calling out to Fire to get ice powers and stuff. But in terms of the actual writing of this book, I like it. The monologue and the way that she talks feels very noir protagonist. People who know the original question, Vic Sage, might feel like that was a great part of him from books that they've read from him, and also the Justice League Unlimited cartoon, which he was big in, which he was enjoyable in. I won't say he was that big in it, but he was enjoyable in it. I recommend this book, and I think it's very easy for newcomers to pick up. You don't need to recognize every background character to enjoy the main issue. I think it's great. And the last of the DC books I'm going to be talking about today is Wonder Woman, the issue 15. Really nice David Nakayama cover, but inside you've also got a beautiful Daniel Sampere artwork, because I think everyone agrees that Daniel Sampere is a massive highlight of this run. I've been reading this run since issue 1, and I'm still on it, but I do want to talk about the fact that I do think this run is pretty controversial. The writer is Tom King, and Tom King is one of the more controversial writers in the industry. The main critiques I've heard are that he writes every character as a self-insert for himself, and that he is such a deconstruction guy. He ends up projecting issues onto characters that maybe don't exist. And I've also noticed, specifically Wonder Woman fans, a lot of hardcore Wonder Woman fans have been very critical of this book, and I do get that criticism. A lot of newcomers have said it's very positive, but it's people who aren't as likely to have previously been reading Wonder Woman. For most Wonder Woman fans, I do think, I have heard that it forces Diana into a sort of man's idea of a strong woman box. It puts her in more of a warrior box than Princess of Peace box, and I, having read the Greg Rucka run, I can really understand that criticism. Another obvious controversy with the book is the introduction of, I think it's Elizabeth Marsden Prince, aka Trinity, who is a new character that was created for this run, and I liked her when I first saw her. I don't dislike her, but I do completely understand the criticism that I've heard from some about the idea that she is essentially a creation that was made to perpetuate the idea of a new Trinity. Naming her Trinity did not help, but she was created to hang out with John Kent and Damian Wayne and be the Trinity of the new era, the new Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. And I'm waiting for her to justify herself, justify her existence outside of that. But in fairness, she's only just been born in canon. I'd give her some time. And reading this book, I do think that it does put Diana in more of this warrior princess, in more of this warrior box and this Princess of Peace box. But the art is so good. Look, something I will say is that as soon as Tom announced that he was going to be introducing a new character, aka Trinity, to be a Wonder Woman successor, as it were, a lot of people did call out saying that this wasn't necessary because of the fact that this book, because of the fact that the previous Wonder Girls, Donna Troy, Cassie Sandsmark, and Yara Flor, do tend to fall by the wayside a lot. Like, you've got the Bat family sustaining multiple comics at the same time, and the same usually isn't true with the Wonder Girls, where they'll end up getting put as the single girl on a team led by a Bat boy. But to this run's credit, it is utilizing the Wonder Girls. You've got a Cassie Sandsmark in here. You've got Yara Flor in here. You've got Donna Troy in here. Don't ask why she's fighting Solomon Grundy. You've even got the book utilizing Cheetah in an interesting way as less of an antagonistic force to Diana. But given the controversial nature of the run, I do also wonder, is this good, or is this implicating characters into this more militaristic way of portraying their fights? Like, the art is so good, though. Like, it looks so nice. Look. It's on a Troy. Come on, man. I am torn on this book. I am very constantly torn on this book. Because there are things I wish it did better. But looking better is not a thing that I want. That I feel like I can ask for from this book. Because it's already so gorgeous. I will say, the backup as well. It has a backup at the end that is... spoilers. It has a backup at the end that is set from the perspective of Steve Trevor, who has just died in the previous issue. It is him in Elysium. It looks really nice. Carrie Randolph art. It looks really nice. And it is a story from the perspective of Steve in the afterlife. And it's a very melancholy story about how as beautiful and as wonderful as paradise is, it will never be paradise for him because Diana is not that. And it's very beautiful. I am torn about this book. I could probably say a bunch more, but there are also people who know more about Wonder Woman who have very well talked about the things they don't like about this book. Personally, I'm not entirely negative on it, but I am still making my mind up as to whether or not I feel entirely positive about it. Cover's nice though, isn't it? So that is my DC pulls for this week. Moving on to Marvel. The Man Without Fear, Daredevil. Now, this is technically part 15 of a story. I don't know why it's a 15-part story. It's good, don't get me wrong. I think this run has been very underrated because it's come off the heels of the Zdarsky run, which is probably in contention for being one of the best modern Daredevil runs of all time. For me, I think it's amazing. I think it's really good. I've got a bunch of it on shelves behind me. But Saladin Ahmed's run has come in a place where it is going to constantly be compared to a run that many people could call character defining. But I really like the Saladin Ahmed run. Whilst there was a lot of Zdarsky that was very ground level, Saladin Ahmed seems like he wanted to do something immediately different out of the gate and has Matt fighting his own demons in a rather literal sense. I have been liking this run. I think it's solid. I think it's a very solid run, and I don't think it's a bad place for anyone who wants to read Daredevil to start reading. Either start issue 1 or the Hell Breaks Loose trade paperback. The Hell Breaks Loose trade paperback would be the best place to start reading the Saladin Ahmed run. You can pick this up and not be the most confused, but you'll still be a bit confused, and I'd maybe recommend starting with the beginning of this run. I do think it's underrated. I like it a lot. I'm liking this run a lot, and we get something in this book that I really like, which is every time Matt Murdock interacts with a priest. Matt Murdock interacting with priests is a cheat code in a Daredevil book to make me like it, because they're the only people who can really make Matt speak honestly about how he is feeling about himself. Some of my favorite stuff from Marvel Comics is conversations that Matt Murdock is having with a Catholic priest. I think it's really good. I can't recommend this Daredevil run highly enough. I I think you should read it. It's got a lot of Matt struggling with his inner turmoil. The art is really good. I hadn't mentioned it, but the art is great. And I do think that his struggles in this current run, him fighting his own inner demons, it's great. It's an interesting take on the character. Really falls into where the character's iconography goes. I like it. You got this. So anyway, my next book is Moon Knight, Fist of Khonshu. So this is technically issue 2 of the Fist of Khonshu series. There was an issue 0, but that's not where I would start if you want to get in on this run. Start with picking up the first Jed MacKay Moon Knight trade paperback, The Midnight Mission. Moon Knight, for as far as I can tell, was given an ongoing because Marvel wanted a Moon Knight book on the shelf as a Moon Knight show was coming out. And what spawned out of the decision to give Jed MacKay a Moon Knight ongoing is one of the best eras in the character's history. It has been fantastic to watch, and I have been loving it. I have been picking this book up, like, issue by issue for a couple years now, and I don't regret a single issue that I've bought. The art on this issue is Alessandro Cappuccio, is how it's pronounced. It looks really good. I've been loving the use of light and shadow in this run, and it's gorgeous. I also think that MacKay has done so much work setting up his status quo that now it feels so important. Moon Knight is currently fulfilling his role as the protector of those who travel as night, those who travel at night. And it started with a lot of vampire stories that have been really good, and he set up a mission, like a church mission, the Midnight Mission. The extended characters, the extended family that have grown out of that have been so much fun that basically every character on this page is a character that I now care deeply about and would be very sad if something happened to. Especially 8-Ball. I love him. I love him so much. If you are watching Jed MacKay, please don't do anything bad to 8-Ball. I love him so much. He really went from a bit character and gimmick villain to a character that you can really get on board with loving. He gets wonderful moments in this story, and it's the kind of thing that you can't do without the level of setup that Jed MacKay has put into this run, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful. If you want to get on this run, start with buying the Midnight Mission trade paperback. It's readily available, I believe. But yeah, check this out. The next issue I'm going to talk about, Phases of the Moon Knight. So, like I said, it's a great era for Moon Knight. Jed MacKay is not on this book, but it's a good book. It's really good. This is an anthology series, so this is incredibly beginner friendly. Ignore the 4 in the corner. You can pick this up as your first book and kind of understand what's going on. The specific issues are For Now by Fabian Nicieza and art by Moises Hidalgo, and the second book is Blood Moon, Blood Brothers, written by Tom Waltz and artists Ken Lashley and Brian Level. I think this anthology has generally, I'll talk about this anthology more after, but I think this anthology has been very strong. For me, my favorite of the 2 stories is definitely For Now, because it does something that I've really been wanting to see, which is reclaiming the Egyptian iconography that Moon Knight is so heavily steeped in. Moon Knight is a character that is incredibly linked to Egyptian mythology and Egyptian iconography, but the character of Moon Knight, the one that everyone thinks of, is a white man living in America. This is a story set in Egypt about an Egyptian archaeologist, Moon Knight, that is very different from the story of Mark Spector being chosen by the Egyptian gods during grave robbing. I also think the art in this book is really good. Check this out. It's fantastic. I like it a lot. It's real good. Check it out. It's a good style that really conveys the story it's trying to tell. I would also say the same thing is true for Blood Moon Blood Brothers, which is the other one. This one is tertiarily in modern continuity in that it's kind of set during the recent Blood Hunt event. If anyone's aware, if you're aware, vampires. It's a big vampire event with Blade, and with Moon Knight, and with Miles Morales turns into a vampire. It's wild stuff. Check it out. But you do not need to have read it to read this story, which is essentially about a family being saved by a version of Moon Knight during that event. And it goes on to tell the story of that version of Moon Knight, who is Mesoamerican. And there's not a ton more I want to say about it other than it's good. It's a good anthology. Me generally saying this, having read all 4 issues, it's been a very good anthology. I rarely read an anthology like this and want so many of the stories to spin out in the way that I want this to. Especially last week as well, there was a fantastic story that was, let me see what it was called. This isn't part of this. I just also liked it and want to talk about it. The past is present. It doesn't just expand on the Moon Knight, like it doesn't just expand on Moon Knight's iconography and continuity and mythos. It also expands on Hunter's Moon, who, as far as I'm aware, new addition for the McKay run, but there is another Fist of Khonshu, meaning we get to see interesting stories about both fists. We get to see interesting stories about Moon Knight, and we get to see interesting stories about previous Hunter's Moons. So I believe the trade paperback of that is going to be coming out recently now. It's going to be coming out soon now that the final issue of Phases of the Moon Knight has come out. I'd check it out. I'd absolutely check out that book if you just want to read some stories that aren't massively present in Moon Knight. It's good stuff. Now, onto my X reading. Exceptional X-Men. Number 1, this is issue 3. You want a good place to start? Start at issue 1. They'll release a trade paperback of all of volume 1, and it will probably include this as well as, 4 more issues. But this, for the Ashes era we're currently in, we have come out of the Krakoan era, and we are currently in the From the Ashes era, where the X-Men are redefining themselves outside of the huge status quo shift that was the Krakoan era, i.e. mutant sanctuary on the island, immortality, all of that stuff. Of the 3 books, it's the X-Men book that's taking place in Alaska, it's Uncanny that's adjectiveless X-Men, as Uncanny X-Men, which is taking place in Louisiana, and it's got the team that you'd probably most recognize. And then you've got Exceptional X-Men, which for the most part seems to have been Kitty Pryde and Emma Frost, with a brand new group of X characters with a brand new group of mutants who they're just introducing. And it's the most grounded of the 3 main X-Men titles. You see a lot of Kitty just talking to normal people and mutants who don't have necessarily code names and everything going on yet. It's good. I'm enjoying this book. I'm really liking it. I think that Emma and Kitty is a real tried and true dynamic and relationship to anchor your book around, and it works. It's a great way to also having Kitty introduced to the new group of young mutants it's great. Obviously, she started out as the X-Men's younger sister, so it's cool to now see her be in that position. I mean, she was never that in my lifetime, but I've read the past stuff, some of the past stuff. I know that was originally her place, and it's cool to see her have fully taken on the role of mentor figure. I will also say, for these 3 kids, Bronze, Melee, and Axo, it can be difficult to write kids it can be worse to write teenagers. I commend Eve Ewing for making these characters likable while still making them recognizably teenagers. They have the overconfidence, but it doesn't make me want to tune them out. They feel a little bit entitled because they don't know everything yet, but I can understand where they're coming from more than wanting to get rid of them. I think this book is really good, and that is why I'm going to keep picking it up. Uncanny is also, just in terms of like what I'm reading X-Men wise right now, Adjectiveless X-Men failed to grab me so far, which is weird because it's Jed McKay and I love him, and it's also got Cyclops, who I love. But currently, I'm not reading Adjectiveless X-Men, although I'm thinking about catching up on Marvel Unlimited so that I can read the raid on Grimalkin, because I am reading Uncanny, because it's got most of my favorite X-Men characters. You got your Gambit, you got Nightcrawler, you got Jubilee. You could put those three on any team and it would be the best X-Men team at any given time. But yeah, it's great. You should absolutely check this out. I am not reading any of the solos except for Nyx, NYX. I am reading that book, and it's fine. It's good. I have issues with it, but I'm reading that book for Kamala Khan. I like Kamala Khan, Miss Marvel. There's all of her solo comics are right there. But I think it works as an X-Men book in a way that it's not scratching an itch as a Kamala solo book, and I think the best answer to that would be to give Kamala a solo book. But that's unsolicited and unprompted. I'm reading Nyx, and I'm going to keep calling it Nyx because I didn't know that it was NYX at first. Anyway, on to Ultimate Spider-Man. I have two covers. This is Ultimate Black Cat. She looks really cool. I am a fan of the design, especially the hair. Thank you, Marco Cicchetto. But this is the best Spider-Man comic coming out of Marvel right now. I might at some point talk about the current state of Spider-Man comics because there's not enough men on the internet who have made a video about the current state of Spider-Man comics. Shout out Sal from Comic Pop. Shout out Alex Lennon. Shout out, just everyone loves talking about the current like Spider-Man books. As a Kamala Khan fan, I'm sure you think I've got some opinions, and I do. But for the problems that someone who likes Spider-Man is having with that book, you should read Ultimate Spider-Man. If you are new to Spider-Man, you can still read Ultimate Spider-Man. The trade paperback is out. The trade paperback for the first 5 issues, I think, is called Married with Children, Married with Kids, and it's out, and you should buy it, and you should read it, because it's really good. The Ultimate Spider-Man book also ties into the Ultimate Universe in ways, and that comes from Ultimate Invasion in ways, which comes from previous Ultimate stuff. But I really do think that while that stuff is interesting and cool to know, and there's more stuff you can take from it, you don't need to be reading it to get onto Ultimate Spider-Man, which is good because, like I said, best Spider-Man book being released at the moment. It's absolutely wonderful. In the ways that a lot of people would criticize current day Amazing Spider-Man for unfortunately keeping Peter Parker trapped in a state of never being able to fully grow up, making his character somewhat annoying to follow, this book doesn't worry about that because it follows a Peter who has grown up. There are mature conversations and character interactions that tell you about the characters. You don't agree with every character, but you can understand why certain characters feel the way they do in ways that make you feel for them instead of wanting them gone. Ideological conflicts are interesting instead of boring. Messina's art as well, similar thing to what I said with the World's Finest book, where Dan Mora is such a big star in the industry right now that anyone who is anyone who is filling in on a Dan Mora usual book is going to have to basically get compared to him. In the same way, this book is done by the cover is Hickman, but the actual book itself, the interiors, are done by David Messina, and it's really good. It's really good. It looks so nice. It's a really beautiful looking book, and I like looking at it. Look at this. Look at the color grading. Can you use that word when you're talking about comics? It looks really nice. I love the intimate lighting here. If you look carefully, you can see a slight Easter egg to the way that Tobey Maguire's mask gets ripped. It's a good book. It's worth reading. It's been a bit of a slow burn in some ways. I've seen a lot of people complaining about Mary Jane, this universe's Mary Jane, maybe not having all the agency when it comes to having her own things going on and having her own thoughts. But I really do think it's a good slow burn building up to I don't want to call it a conflict, but a conversation in this story that shows that that's not the case, that she has a lot of feelings, and that it's due to the mature trust that her and Peter have in each other as partners, as co-parents, as so much that they are willing to talk about this stuff in ways that are mature and fun. It's the most fully realized depiction of Peter Parker in comics, I think. Peter Parker is all about great power, great responsibility, and I do think this book gets it in such a big way because he recognizes and he bears his responsibilities. But it's not just his superheroing responsibilities that he has to bear. He has a wife. He has children. He has an uncle who he wants to look out for. He's got a job at a paper. All of that stuff is so important. It's not just Spider-Man. And what we are being shown is a Peter Parker who understands that all of those are actual responsibilities for him. It's great. It's a great book. Pick it up. Read it. Ultimate Black Cat is less of a force in this book than you would expect her to be, considering she is a character who is on the cover. But I am looking forward to seeing more of her. She looks fun. Next issue 12, has Spidey Claws. It's got Spidey Claws on the cover, so I am prepared for peak. Read Ultimate Spider-Man. Pick up the trade paperback for Married with Children. It's really good. Now, on to more independent stuff. The first thing I would like to, the first thing that I picked up that's more independent is this book, Moondogs. This is Image Comics. This is, let me get the names. This is Tananarive Dew and Kelsey Ramsey as the writer and artist, respectively. I'm not actually aware of any of their work before this, but this book put them both on my watch list. They are both amazing. This book is really good. This is part of the Horizon Experiment initiative from Image Comics, which I really do want to talk about because it was spearheaded by the writer of The Good Asian, Ponsak Pitchachot. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I did go on YouTube to try and hear him say it, and I believe that's the case. During a conversation, he was talking with other writers about the concept of certain genre fiction being told from the lens of minority voices. For example, the story he did, which was 2 months ago, was The Manchurian, which is essentially the story of a Chinese James Bond. And I need to pick it up. I need to pick it up because last month's was a story called The Sacred Damned, and it was amazing. The pitch was a Muslim John Constantine, and my God, did it deliver. Wonderful book. Pick it up. Read it. Wonderful. This book, specifically, is werewolf/lycanthrope lore, but through the perspective of a family of East African descent, a culture with different ideas of lycanthropy, like were hyenas. This is incredibly newcomer friendly. All of the books I'm talking about, they have come out as one-shots, single issues that do not carry on from anything and will not have any real continuation unless you buy them, which is why I bought this and why I bought The Sacred Damned. I need to find a copy of The Manchurian. But my god, if you are a fan of werewolf stories, pick up this book. Pick up this book. It's absolutely wonderful. The art is gorgeous. The art is beautiful. Like, there's a real grime to this art that you feel it. This world feels lived in. This world feels on our level, whilst also being a world that I know is someone else's world. An interesting thing that they use is insert pages, in the same way that if anyone was reading a lot of Jonathan Hickman work, they would know that he is very used to insert pages. So you've got this page here, and you've got another page later on that talks about different ideas of lycanthropy, but it's not overdone. And I really do think that here it is. I really do think that the writing is so natural. It's so engaging. It's a story about werewolves, but it's a story about lycanthropes, but in the same way that most of the best horror stories, the horror stories really worth their salt, aren't just about the horror. This book is about family, and it's a real story talking about discontent at the system, like the pathways of radicalization. This book's wonderful. Like, I cannot recommend it enough, and of the books that I'm recommending on this video, it's probably the one that the fewest people is going to read. So not to belabor a point, pick up this book, especially if you like horror or werewolves. Good stuff. And the final book I am going to talk about that I picked up this week is The Power Fantasy by Kieran Gillen. This is issue 4. I would recommend starting at issue 1 because of the fact that there is continuity between issues. It's a story being told. I believe there is a trade paperback of the first 5 issues, so up to this and to the next issue that will be coming out in January. So I recommend picking that up. This is written by Kieran Gillen and has art by Caspar Wingard. Kieran Gillen is one of my favourite working authors right now, and this book is such a testament as to why. To give you some background, Kieran was a big part of Krakoa, and he was writing my favourite book of the Krakoa of the X-Men Krakoan era, Immortal X-Men. A book that was mostly about the political machinations of the leaders of the X-Men, the leaders of mutant kind, the Quiet Council. A bunch of characters who all have these amazing feats and are all incredibly powerful. And the way he talks about it, the idea he had was essentially, well, if you look at all of these characters and the amount of power they have, they're never going to fight. They can't fight. Because if they did, we'd all be dead. Any want to survive would mean would involve non-fighting methods. Like, there isn't a world where Storm and Apocalypse go all out at each other, where everyone is fine and okay about it. So he decided to tell a story about that, but taken away from Marvel continuity so that he was able to do everything he wanted to do, and that's what the Power Fantasy is. This is about people with superpowers when we are using the Cold War definition of superpowers. This is like people so unthinkably powerful that they can't fight, and therefore it is it is global political machination being read through interpersonal relationships, arguments, and just personal connection. This book is amazing. I've written notes and I've written fuck fuck fuck. It's so good. It's heartless in the best ways, heartbreaking in the most cutting, and oh so inventive in its use of power. No fights, all conflict. And that's what this book is. If you're in a book for big fight scenes, I'm sorry you will be disappointed. If you are in a book for reading people interacting with other people in ways that grab you by the neck or by the heart, this is a book to read. Oh my god, it's so good. My major criticism of this book is just that I want it all. Like, I don't know how many issues this book is going to be. 12, I think. In the last issue, they ended up doing a timeline that talked about like everyone's powers and the fact that some of this book was going to be done out of order, and that timeline references books that haven't come out yet. And my god, Kieran Gillen, if you're watching, that was nasty work. Give me all of the issues, please. I promise I won't tell anyone what happens. But yeah, read this book. The art, also the Caspar Wingard art is gorgeous. Caspar Wingard's art is stylized in a way that I find really, really beautiful. Like, the color palette is great as well. This character, Etienne Lux, he's my favorite because he's very Charles Xavier coded, and by that I mean a bit of a bastard, but also, I think he could best be summed up with the idea of it is better to, if it helps, it's better to be a good man. I wish I had that luxury. I'm trapped striving to be an ethical one. And, this book, this is that book. This is the book that makes you think about everything. I cannot recommend this book highly enough. Please read it. The first issue got 3 printings. I think the second issue got 2 printings. I don't know how they're doing on printings now as we're going down the line. This is the 4th issue. But it's one of my favorite books. Absolutely one of my favorite books of the year. So I cannot recommend this highly enough. And that is my pull list for the week of November the 20th. And now here's what I have been reading in my own time. First of all, Mark Russell's Flintstones, art by Steve Pugh. This book it's from 2016, and it's better than it has any right to be honest. If you're a fan of the Flintstones, you might like this book, you might not like this book. If you aren't a fan of the Flintstones, you might like this book, and you might not like this book. It's very tonally different. Like, give it a try, see what your mileage is. It's like I said, tonally different. Whereas the original cartoon was this prehistoric family sitcom, this book is more like a sort of cutting satire of modern life through the lens of early man and caveman. It touches on themes of like bigotry, class dynamics, the disposability of modern consumerism. It's weirdly touching and emotional at points where I'm just like, why are you making me feel like this, Flintstones comic? Like, you know that whole thing in the Flintstones where every household device and anything is just a prehistoric animal and all of that? You get to see their lives in a way that really, really makes you feel for them. And it's just... I think it's very funny. I think it's very good. I think it's great, like, class and social commentary, and I do recommend it. It might be a little heavy-handed with some of its satire and cultural critique, but I don't know. I feel like we didn't learn from subtlety. We've had decades of subtlety. This is what exists now, and by now I mean 8 years ago. So this is really good. This is enjoyable. This is a good thing to read. This is The Closet by James Tynion IV. Read this recently. Also really good. This is very new reader friendly. Both of these books are new reader friendly. This one specifically, this isn't an ongoing story. This is a standalone in this book, and if you are a fan of like horror films and stuff, or even like just scary stories, even more so scary stories, it's good like cerebral, like spooky child horror that just sort of sits in your bones. Like the art in here is very, it's simplistic in a way, but I would argue more so understated in a way that just feels very very grounding for the book, and I think that is very good. Like, if you're looking for a slasher or something like that, this isn't what you'll find in here. The horror in this book is far more almost metaphysical. Like it's like sort of addressing the effect that household unrest can have on children in a major way. In general, if you like horror stuff, if you really like horror stuff, you should read James Tynion IV. James Tynion IV is the king of indie horror right now, and he's going from strength to strength. I recommend checking out all of his stuff. This is what I recently read, and I would check this out, as well as like Mematic and Something is Killing the Children, etc. And in terms of the third book I've been reading that I want to talk about, it's We Call Them Giants, written by Kieran Gillen and art by Stephanie Hans. This, I'm actually really lucky. I managed to get this in London. I went to Gosh Comics on the night of Halloween, and I managed to get not just the book, I got this signed book plate featuring the main character, and I got my book signed. I also went and I got all of my copies of Die, the indie comic, as well as the source book for the role-playing game, signed, and it was great. But I also got the book, this gorgeous, beautiful book that, like I said, same creative team that worked on Die, and it is such a beautiful looking book. It's so gorgeous. It's so pretty. It's dynamic as well. Like, look at this panel composition. Like, it's so good. And it's new. It's very new. Like I said, I bought it very recently. It might be difficult to get a handle on at first when you start reading it. If you are the kind of person who's reading a book because you want to get all the answers and everything is going to get spelled out for you, then maybe this is going to be a struggle for you. Because this isn't a book that teaches you the lore of what we called giants and everything. It is far more a story about just sort of love and the care we have for other people. It's great. This book is really good. I definitely recommend it highly. Pick it up at your, I don't know, local bookstore. Is it selling at your local book? Check if it's selling at your local bookstore, and if it's there, maybe buy it. It's good. You probably won't regret buying it. I didn't regret buying it. This is wonderful. But yeah, like that's the stuff I've been reading this week, pull list wise. That's the stuff I've been reading outside of my pull list. Absolutely check some of that stuff out. I love comics. You guys should read the stuff that I'm recommending or other stuff. Let me know in like the comments below if there's any stuff you're reading that I'm not onto yet. Let me know. I want to check stuff out. In anyone who's talking about the Energon universe, I've been getting really into that. I got the first issue of G.I. Joe last week. If you want me to talk about the Energon universe, or like, I don't know, Ultimate and Absolute are both going on, and both of them have interesting stuff to talk about. Basically, if there's anything you think I should be talking about on here, it probably means there's an audience to hear it, so let me know. Thank you. Bye.